I guess you guys got a tournament tomorrow? Is that what it is? Today and tomorrow? What's leading? Who's that? This guy? On that?
It helps.
Okay. All right. 11 pounds?
I couldn't say that they ate that today, but
Okay.
we'll see about tomorrow.
Was that, what time did the wind start blowing today? 2? 2, 3 o'clock? Really? I think the weather pattern you guys had today will probably hold again tomorrow. This wind probably won't be here in the morning. So you guys will be in good shape. And especially for some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. I know this is a stupid question, but how many of you guys like throwing frogs? Like everybody, right? Dummy, hey dummy, why'd you ask that, right? I'll tell you what, I mean, there's a couple of different ways to throw them, of course. And one of my favorite ways of throwing them is in open water. And a lot of my clients that I take out, they, you know, is there any, you know, we talk a day or two in advance on the phone, and, well, how much moss is out there? You know, is there any moss? Well, I was out there last week and I didn't find any moss. Man, where are we going to throw frogs at? Be patient, be patient, be patient. And a lot of the stuff that we do with the frog, I would say that we probably catch probably 50 or 60% of our frog fish in open water. And everybody hears that word frog and they think, you know, heavy vegetation and moss and whatever it may be, and that's great. But the only problem is those fish really only eat in that stuff for about an hour. And when I say eat, I'm talking about eating good, you know, where it's not the ping pong or playing volleyball or, you know, blowing it out of the water and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about, ooh, when they get it. And it's about an hour window, but realistically you only get 3 or 4 true quality sticks during that window. You know, you might get 7 or 8, 9 bites in that window, and if you connect with 3 or 4 of those and you execute those bites, you're going to do real well, probably win the tournament. You know, that's a lot of discipline and all that kind of stuff, and understanding that you're not going to get a whole lot of bites doing this. So, you know, live and die by the sword, and that's kind of the way I look at it, because that's about what it is. You're playing with dynamite when you're dealing with that froggy. The open water thing is a little bit different. I think that with the open water situation, when you start fishing that frog in open water, you open that window up a little bit, and it expands that window. You can fish for a fish that's actually feeding, trying to target something, and a fish that might be suspended, that is in a neutral mood, but you can antagonize that fish into striking. Similar with a buzz bait or a swim bait. You know, a lot of those fish aren't really, that eat that swim bait, or especially the fish that follow that swim bait, they're in a neutral mode or a negative mode. But you, with that bait, and it's so lifelike, and the presentation is there, you can get those hackles to come up and she will attack that bait. And it's very similar with the frog. And that's why I really, you know, I would rather throw the frog from June to September than throw a spinnerbait and catch 15 or 20 fish with a blade, you know, and you take your, you know, 12 pounds to the scales, maybe one of them's a 4 or 13 or 14 pounds, and we're talking summertime situation, water temperature over, you know, 72 to 75 degrees right in there. I would rather cut those bites by about 60%, you know, and let's deal with 6, 7 bites, 8 bites in a tournament day, and let's execute 4 of those, and then maybe throw 1 spinnerbait or 1 helix fish, you know, in the mix, and now we got a good sack. If we can execute 3 or 4 of those frog bites during that tournament day, heck, if you execute 5 or 6 of them, now you're in bonus land, you know, and then you win by a lot. But you know, that's all about discipline. And I tell a lot of guys, you know, and when I'm guiding, I always ask the guys, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to throw, everybody wants to throw a frog. Everybody wants to throw a frog, everybody decides, I want to catch a 5-pounder on a frog. Okay, we'll try and do that. We'll try and do that tomorrow. We'll try and get you a 5-pounder on a frog. We're going to probably get you the bite. It's up to you to execute it. And a lot of that has to do with personal mechanics and the type of equipment that the guy shows up with. Now, I always offer the kind of equipment that I use, but you know, guys like to use their own stuff too. We'll talk a little bit about the kind of stuff that I like to use. For open water applications, like what we've been more or less talking about, the first part of this deal, I like to use 50 to 65 pound braid. And I use spider wire. I use spider wire or spider wire stealth. And use a high-speed reel. I like the Corrados. The Corrados are probably better than this one I've got here. But this, I'm so used to this reel, I just love it. I use an 806 flipping stick, 8 foot. Pretty stout rod for open water only. I do not throw this frog with this setup into the moss. Been there, done that, been disappointed too many times. Get that big bite and you just can't winch on that fish. 806, 8 foot flipping stick, man, what are you talking about? Well, the reason I say that is because the 797's got a whole lot more juice. It's got about 30% more juice from tip to about right here. And that's, I'll tell you right now, you either catch a frogfish or you lose a frogfish on the initial swing. You either got it or you don't, period. And so that's where that rod really, really becomes important. The rod, you know, I always tell guys, if you can, I know that 7 foot, 2 inch is a very popular size with a lot of guys. It's real comfortable, guys can work it, you know, and that's great. What I try and tell guys is, you know, cut the jig off your flipping stick and tie that frog on that, and start with that, and then go up or down in increments of 6 inches. Maybe the flipping stick's a little bit too much for you. Let me use my 7 foot jig rod or whatever it may be, you know. But it's got to have a nice parabolic bend, and it's got to have a lot of juice. You don't want a fast tip on a frog rod. You don't want this. No. 2 pounders, 3 pounders, occasionally the 4 pounder, you're fine. But we're talking about frogfish. We're talking about fish over 6 pounds. And that's not going to happen every day. But when it does happen, that particular second that it does happen, you want to make sure you got the equipment, stack the deck as much as you possibly can. 797, that's the 806 for open water application. And again, when I'm fishing this bait in open water, now this is the frog that we've got coming out on the market here pretty quick. This is my series frog. It's my signature series frog. We started doing this to our frogs about 5 years ago. We cut the thighs off of them. You know how your standard frog has got the thighs on it? Okay? And this is the new frog. See what's missing? Okay? And the main reason we started doing that, the main reason, and it kind of worked out to our advantage, was I got tired of this. It would be so, I got tired of it happening to me, and I got tired of it happening to my clients. You get the big bite, you've been working for 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, you got 3 good bites. One real good bite. You executed it, everything was there, and that frog came back like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I got to the point where I said, you know what, this ain't happening no more. We got to work around this. Chris, we got to figure something out, man. So, anyway, we came up with this, and this is the way we've been doing it. This is the way we've been doing it for about, like I say, about 5 years. So we don't have that problem anymore. And the byproduct of doing that, the first thing that we noticed, you know, back then we fished our frogs so fast, we didn't notice the true beauty of what we had just done. If you take this bait right here and you pitch it into open water next to a tight clump of tulies, preferably with a piece of wood sitting next to it on a nice halfway through the outgoing tide kind of deal, make that pitch, let it sit, that current's rocking that frog, and then you start to walk it to about right here, and you let her fall back here, twitch, ooh, that's when she gets pumped. But the thing is, because we're doing it like that, those thighs don't restrict the movement. With the standard frog, and the thighs the way they are, when you try and walk it, the head moves about like this. You cut the thighs off and it moves like this. Okay? So we use that bait. How many spots do you guys have out here? You're on a good Zara spook bite, right? And you go, oh man, I'd like to get that spook in there. You can. cut the thighs off your frog, make the sweet pitch, let it sit, bob the nose. She either eats it then, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stop, bob. If she's there, she's going to punch it. Okay? So you just took and put a zero spook situation where you'd love to throw that baby in there, but there's just too many treble hooks hanging off of it. You throw a bait like that in there, let her sit. The most important thing when you're working that frog in open water, and a lot of my clients, you know, they get in the back and I tell them, okay, this is what we're doing, make the pitch, and of course if you can pitch good, you're going to be a good open water frog fisherman. If you can't pitch good, then you need to work on it. Not only for your frog stuff, but for everything else. It will complement your whole scheme. A lot of my guys, they pitch that frog out there and they start coming back like this, and that frog comes back like this with the nose directly pointed at them. And I tell them, look, when you pop that thing on the downswing, and I want my guys to keep their rod from 6 to 8 o'clock. More from 6 to 7 o'clock, really. Pop, pop, pop. Not up here. Too much, too violent. Right in here, 6 to 7 o'clock. And on the downstroke, I want that frog to come forward, and I want it to put slack in your line. That's the only way that the nose of that frog will move to the left or move to the right, is if there's slack at the end of your rod. When you pop that rod, that bait's going to come towards you, and the momentum's going to keep coming, and it will start to turn to the left or turn to the right. If you allow it to, if you try to keep that line tight, that frog's just going to come back with his nose straight. If you go pop, and that line comes and relaxes like that, that frog's going to move this way. And then on the next pop, she's going to bounce this way. And it's a thing of beauty. At the shows this year, there's quite a... Kirk Prowse comes to mind right now. He used to be the old Bass Cat rep. Now I think he's with Triton. Kirk said, I've never been able to walk a frog. I don't know what you guys are talking about. This was when we were in Long Beach. And matter of fact, Tony Stokes was there. And I took him over around the corner, and we got into the little fly fishing pond. And Kirk got up on the deal, and I said, you've never been able to walk a frog, right? And I said, he goes, yeah. And I said, we're going to have you walking this thing within 3 throws, because I know he's a good Zara spook fisherman. So he pitches it out there, he lets it sit, and he went bop, bop, bop. The first time back, it came back pretty straight. And I said, walk it like it's a Zara spook. And he goes, that's all I had to say to him. Ooh, and he started having that joker dancing, and I had to fight him to get that rod back because he was having a good time with it. Man, look at me, I'm walking a frog, dude, this is bad. And those guys at Lake Mead catch a lot of fish. Lake Mead, see down 30 feet, you can read a newspaper in 40 feet of water, they catch a lot of fish on frogs in open water on them steep walls. But anyway, another thing with your open water applications, a couple things. It's real important to have one of these. Okay, big felt tip marker. How many of you guys don't paint your braided line black? Everybody does? Okay. Before I start, every day before we start, we get that big old felt pin, and we take a knife and we put a slice in it. And then I take this guy and put it right in there, and I usually run it up, and I'll let a little more line out. I'll run about 8 yards, 10 yards. Because you know how that braided line bleaches out. If it's brand new braid, you're fine. You know, for 2 or 3 fishing trips, probably. But then that braided line's going to start to bleach out, and I would much rather have that line go into that open water frog with a black as opposed to a white or a cream colored laundry cord going to the nose of Kermit. You know what I'm saying? Let's not do that. So that really helps out a lot. Oh, one of the other things about this new frog, how many of you guys are putting the frog hooks in your froggy? Everybody. You're putting the Gamakatsu hooks in your froggy? You are? Just like those, right? Very cool. Very cool. And then this is a little paint job that I put on. You know, hey, all of us bass fishermen are the same. We all got to tinker with stuff, right? We can't throw anything that's stock. So this one right here is called Cicada. This one right here is called Cicada, and this is fast becoming probably my favorite open water bait. She's got the red eyes, got the white belly, and when she walks, it works. It works. No. And I know that you know, I have a lot of my guys that show up and I say, well, here's your frog. No, I got one. And I look at the frog that they got tied on, and it's like, holy Toledo, what are we going to do? We're going to try and gaff something with that thing? What? I mean, it's got a hook here, it's got one down here, and it's got two of them hanging up here, and man, we're not going to be able to throw that thing anywhere. But and what's that? Yeah. I'll tell you what. When they're in the mood, and you make the proper presentation, those fish will go through a 3/8 inch piece of plywood to get your bait. You know what I'm saying? You can't, when you get a 3.5 pounder that's tuned up and you make the proper presentation and you start.
I don't think that really increases your hookup. If he goes for it, he's going to get it. When he goes for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, it's just like my spinner baits and just like my buzz baits. I don't use trailer hooks on my buzz baits. I don't use trailer hooks on my spinner baits because I can't fish it where I want to. Now there's times if I'm out in the weeds in the trap and I'm slow rolling in 7 feet of water, you know, you get a lot of those better fish that will brush up against the bait or just nip at it. And a lot of those nips were, oh, I just got bit. You know, start putting a trailer hook on and I've seen some of those fish, you know, whoa, man, that's a nice 3 3/4 or 4.5 or whatever. I think I've caught them up to maybe 7 pounds on a stinger hook, slow rolling blade, and Disappointment Slough, you know, when they were just kind of ticking stuff. Anyway, it's a whole different deal. So there are applications for it, and there are times when I will do that, but I will never use anything but those hooks on the frog. The open water strike is so violent. You know, I want to say sometimes a 3-year-old can catch them. You know, they don't happen a lot, but and that's why I tell guys they got to be mechanically sound on every pitch. On every pitch, it's got to be money. You know, a lot of guys, you know, they throwing. Half hour later, oh, look at that cast. Well, what about the 67 before that? You know, so I tell guys, you know, just be as mechanically sound as you possibly can. And when you get those fish, you know, in that 0 to 4 foot water column, and you start making proper presentations, you know, depth and speed, that's the whole key to this game. And if you get them in the right depth, you're fishing, you're attacking the right depth, and you're working that bait at the proper speed, you're going to be successful if you execute those strikes. Okay. Now, in the heavy duty stuff, in the moss and all that, and I know, you know, a lot of the great moss patches that have been set up this year, you know, over the last 3 weeks, it got blown out, and I know you guys have probably got to experience some of that. There was a great one right over here on one of these berms, but you know, you can't fight that, and we got tired of that happening about 6-7 years ago. That's why we started attacking stuff on the outside in the open water, because I was so tired of getting some really nice fish, nice big bites, especially in Disappointment and White Slough. You get those nice big bites in the moss. Man, I got a patch of moss that's got them. We got them up to 6 or 7 pounds yesterday, and we got 4 of them, and we quit sticking them. And then you go back there the following weekend in a tournament, and it's gone. You know, that wind went, disappeared, gone. Ah. But a lot of times you look down and you go, oh, now I can understand why they were there. Because there's big weeds, and then a big hole in the weeds. Bare bottom. 2 foot depth, 3 foot depth at low tide. That's why they were there. So you can use that as a tool too. The other thing I like to have sitting around is a beaver. Sweet beaver. I know everybody's got them. Andre's got some really awesome stuff. Put a 3/8 or half-ounce size head on it. Always got this rod laying next to me. 806 flip and stick, 50 to 65 pound braided line. And when a fish, you got to evaluate the commitment that fish had towards your bait, whether you got a front coming in or whatever, front that just came through or whatever it may be, temperature's dropping. That fish wanted it. The size of that swirl, the water that fish moved, that's a good one. I gotta have them. Over the last half hour, the last 45 minutes, things haven't been really great. So a lot of times, in a situation like that, 90% of the time, instead of throwing the frog back at him, I'm gonna come out of there real cool with that frog, drop it, pick this up, pitch back the pocket, let it hit. And the thing that a lot of guys do wrong with the follow-up bait, when you have a fish that tries to eat your frog in the goo, in the cheese, whatever you want to call it, realistically, you got about up to maybe 7 seconds. 10 seconds is really, really pushing it. You got up to about 7 seconds to catch that fish. Okay, she got flared up. She either did it or she decided at the last second not to, but her hackles are still up. She's very catchable right now for the next 5 or 7 seconds. If you go, especially in team tournaments, that's, a lot of times that's not even fair. She's there. And a lot of times the guy will go, my partner Chris, she's on it. He goes, and he's standing there like this. And if she gives a half-hearted effort, he goes, pulls, click, feeds line, she's got it. And I'm already dropping my rod and grabbing the net. Boom, bonus. High five, put her in the box. Let's get another one. The one thing that a lot of guys don't do properly is when that fish tries to get that bait, and again, this is why pitching is very, very important. It's going to put a whole lot more fish. If you're mechanically sound, it's going to help you put a whole lot more better quality fish in the boat. Boy, this reel sounds like it's wiped out. Is that going to work? Okay. If you get one to blow a hole in the moss or commits and just opens up a crack, good situation for this. Pitch back past the spot. I always hold my rod tip high. I pull. Once it gets to the spot, I drop my rod, pull one strip like that, and click it over. Yes, you want that thing to go through that hole as fast as possible. You don't want it to go. You don't want it to sit up there and she's sitting there. Her hackles are up, and the longer that thing sits there and quivers, she does this, and then it comes down, and it comes down real slow. But when she's sitting there and she's all flared up and she's wondering, she sees it coming and it comes through and it comes through, ooh, she's got to have it right now. I'm telling you, when you get that thing in the hole, you want it to go down and you want it to go perpendicular with the bottom as fast as possible. And that fish will usually eat that thing about 75% of the time. Okay? Presentation, mechanics. Important. Okay? One thing I don't think I mentioned, open water applications with the rivet, you will get so many more bites with 50-pound braid as opposed to 65 or 80. It's not even funny. The 65 to 80, the line diameter is, it's like throwing a rattle trap with 25-pound test. How many bites are you going to get on a rattle trap with 15 as opposed to 25? Especially out in the track in the clear water, right? No comparison. Very similar with the frog. 50 is fine. You can, I mean, we catch stripers up to almost, well, this year, almost 50 pounds on 50-pound braid. Okay? 50-pound braid is good stuff. The only way it's going to come apart is if you tie a poor knot or you got a bad guide. Okay? Or you've been flipping the rocks and didn't cut off enough line before you put your bait on. Okay? That's a quick synopsis on the rivet. Does anybody have any questions? No questions?
When you're casting in open water, are you mainly blind casting, or are you actually looking for spots?
In open water, I'm always throwing at targets. And especially first thing in the morning, isolated pieces of wood on rock walls, very good. Berms with nice little pockets, very good. And you'll find, especially this time of the year, if you've got a cool little berm that's got where your boat is in flipping position, you look at your meter, you've got 10 to 12, 14 feet of water under your boat, not 35, not 24, not 4, not 3. We're talking consistency here. if you look at your meter and it's got 9 to 14 feet of water underneath your boat, that's a good burn. Very good burn.
What about tides?
Tides.
Water is throwing the frog.
You know, tides are extremely important, but low light can get you around the tide thing a little bit. Yeah, yeah. There's always an open water frog bite in the mornings from May 15th to September 1st. Somewhere there is an open water frog bite.
No matter what the tide is.
If it's the tide, you know, these fish, they still haven't settled in to their pure, true summertime patterns out here. And I always tell guys, if the water temperature is over 70 degrees, they prefer lower water. If the water temperature is below 62, they prefer the higher water. You know, springtime, you always catch your giants on that big water. Multiple giants. A lot of the big giants are caught at the bottom of the tide because guys flip to a bed. Oh, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about the big ones that you catch in the springtime on the high tide. Those are your big females that are feeding. Feeding. Not on a bed, not guarding a bed, and she ate a 9-inch Cinco or whatever it is. Okay? Good for you, it was a lucky flip. We're talking about actually fishing for fish that are feeding. That big water in the springtime is the deal. So.
What about the hour you said about when you're fishing the master of the moss? There's like a good hour you're going to get. What determines that hour? Is it time related?
It is. It's very tide related. And like I say, they just haven't locked into that. Sometimes it's towards the top of the tide. Sometimes it's at the bottom of the tide. But the thing is, once you think you got them figured out, they throw you a curveball. And they start to do it 2 hours into the outgoing or 2 hours before the top. It's like a pie, and you got to figure out which one it is going to be. And even when the weather's really kooky and you know, you got a rising barometer, which isn't a great thing all the time, you still have these little bitty windows in between the major windows where maybe you didn't get a bite for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, then all of a sudden, oh, whoa, who woke these guys? And now we go another hour and a half without getting bit. No movement, no bites, no nothing. Boy, that was weird. That was cool. I wouldn't have experienced that if I was throwing a speed trap in some little opening, you know. So you learn a lot when you throw this thing for hours on end, and it's amazing how much you learn after you haven't been bit for a long time, and then all of a sudden you see what happens and you go, whoa, that was pretty neat. All right, I'm going to come back tomorrow or 2 days later, and I think I understand what these fish just told me today. Now I'm going to come back tomorrow or 2 days from now. I'm going to test this out again. I'm going to see if I'm right. Start looking at your tide book, look at your clock a little bit. Ooh, I'll be darned. Hey, man, I'm moving in the right direction. I got a pretty good idea when these guys are eating. They've been all over the board so far this year. And it's pretty frustrating for me because I like to be able to know when these guys are going to go off, you know. And it's kind of a crapshoot right now. But as things stabilize a little bit, and they should be there any time, especially after this kooky full moon just finished. Get those full moons out of here. Let's have everybody settle back down, get into your true summer patterns, and let's get on with this thing. You know, which it's going to start happening anytime.
So besides the frog and the sweet beaver, what else do you throw?
I brought one. How many guys have been throwing this? Trixie shad? Excellent, excellent summertime bait. Excellent summertime bait. Bring it over the top of the weeds. I use a 5 or 6/0 Gamakatsu EWG super line hook. And you know, your hook point is like this. I tweak it off to the side just a tad. Okay? And instead of rigging this bait, I throw this with 65-pound braid, 50 or 65 braid. instead of rigging it standard, straight up and down,
No weight, no nothing.
no weight, just with a hook, just a hook, 5/0 or 6/0, super line. It's amazing how far you can throw this thing. It's a pretty heavy chunk of cheese, you know, and with that hook, that really helps out the weight thing. Instead of rigging it like this, like you would a fluke, welcome to Bethel Island. Instead of rigging it standard like this here, I turn it on its side and lay it flat and rig it that way because it's more buoyant this way. I don't have to fish it as fast to keep it on the surface. So I can fish this thing extremely slow, and I can throw this thing where I'd love to be able to throw a buzzbait. Okay, that's the beauty of this. And the sound that the tail makes, I think the whole trick with this bait is the sound that the tail makes. You can't get a buzzbait to make this sound. So, and it's pretty amazing watching how far some of these fish will come to get this thing. You're nodding your head. You've experienced this thing. You've been nodding your head ever since I've been talking. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
So even on a day like this with the wind blowing?
It's pretty cool. A lot of these fish, and that's where you got to be the cool cucumber guy, a lot of these fish will let you know they're coming like 8, 9, 10 yards away. And I haven't had a whole lot of baits. You know, in the old days, they used to do that with the frog. Where, you know, Greg and I'd be pop, 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 pop. Oh, here she comes. Pop, 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 pop. Don't change your cadence. She's already tuned into it. She knows where she's going to intercept that thing. And they V for it. Ooh. The one thing, when you get a fish that starts to V for this as well as a buzzbait, you throw it up there. Well, I hold my rod like this and I always pop it. If you come over the top of a fish, a lot of times a big fish, when you come right over the top of where she's sitting, you know, that bait just came over that far from where she was. She was behind some weeds or whatever it may be. Up, 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 up. A lot of times these fish will rush the bait from the backside and come up and kill it. We call it seeing on a bait. They see on it. You'll come by a piece of wood or whatever it may be. This fish will branch around and come around and eat it that way. They see on it. Big fish love to come up the backside. Your smaller fish, I'm not saying that I haven't had big ones come straight up on it or charge from, you know, whatever it may be. But that's really, really cool. And those are the ones that if you're not careful, a lot of times you'll jerk it away from them. But if you see a bait, a fish see on a bait, just a real quick, hard, vicious click to the side and come up the backside, don't miss those. Those are the ones you gotta have, okay? But this is a great, great bait. And you know, as far as the colors go, I think it's the sound. You know, I mean, I've used the watermelon, works. I've used the black with red flake with the, Andre did me some with the yellow head on them, which is cool, like the frog we use. Works. This one here, which is sparkly with the chartreuse back, works, of course. The pearl with the blue back works. They all work. Just grab your favorite color. You know, hey, I can do this. I can have that thing tied on all day long. It won't bug me. I'm not going back and forth with different colors. You know, just grab a color that appeals to you. One or two, grab a light one, grab a dark one, and throw it. Throw it. You're going to miss a lot of fish with it. That's okay. I miss a lot of fish with it. You know, Andre misses a lot of fish with it. But it's almost like you just got to hesitate for a second. Sometimes you can poke them as soon as that water goes. Oh, as soon as you see that white water, you can poke them. She's got it already. But a lot of times they poke it. If you just had the discipline to just drop that rod tip that far, just drop that rod tip 6-8 inches and then swing. Whew, I'm still trying to learn that. I get too juiced up when they come chasing this thing. But anyway.